on the program, we're going to take you out to Joliet, where it is happening. The trial of Drew Peterson is getting underway today as jury selection has started. And there was a report that Drew Peterson actually introduced himself to members of the jury pool.
Hi, I'm Drew.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out if that's true and what that means, but we got to get to the bottom of those reports. All right. Corbin Dates is on the Super Celebrity Hotline. Now, Corbin Dates was actually in the Century 16 Theater 9 in Aurora, Colorado for the midnight show of The Dark Knight Rises, and has now been... Corbin, how many different law enforcement agencies have you talked to since Friday morning?
Honestly, I've only spoke to one law enforcement agency. I made a reportment and statement with the Aurora Police Department.
Okay. And there's an interesting narrative that is being created around your particular story, because you were in the second row. Why don't you just tell us what you saw initially, and then we'll go from there.
Initially, when I was sitting in the second row, probably about 4 seats away from the main aisle, there was a guy that came into the theater after me and sat down in the very first row to the very far right. Nobody was in that row but him. And it seemed like he got a phone call because he went towards the emergency exit door to take it instead of actually taking it right there or going towards the lobby. Mm-hmm. He propped his foot open by the door, and the way his body gestures, it was like it was sort of how you would act if you were trying to get somebody to find your location where you are, or as if you were telling somebody to meet me at this location. Mm-hmm. That's what it looked like.
Okay. So you thought it was actually, it did appear he was talking to somebody, not just staging that so that it would appear that he could leave and then come back through that entrance. And that's the entrance he did come back through, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So how long was it between the time that he left and he came back?
I honestly was not paying attention to the time because while he was out there, my friend had informed me that she had arrived at the theater that I was waiting for, so I left the auditorium as well.
Was the movie already going at that point?
No. As me and my friend were coming back into the theater, the lights were just now dimming, and the movie was just now coming on.
Okay. So you went back to those seats that you were sitting in, or some other seats?
And we went to the same exact seats.
Okay. So you're there in the second row, and then all of a sudden this guy in full body armor with the weaponry comes in through that door.
About 20 minutes after the official Batman movie started, a few scenes have already gone by, and then the door that person walked out of swung back open, and some guy walks into the theater dressed all in black, head to toe. The only thing you could see was his eyes, something strapped around his neck, which looked like a rifle. And everybody, including myself, we thought it was a stunt as a part of the film. Mm-hmm. We thought it was a fan that really wanted to thrill us. But it turns out it wasn't that way at all.
And what was the first thing? When did you notice that this wasn't benign?
Because when he came into the audience, he walked towards, I don't want to say the complete center of the stage, but I want to say probably mid-center, and he threw a canister into the audience, and people were still thinking that this was probably a stunt from somebody. The canister went off, letting out a toxic gas that was hard. It was hard to breathe. People were coughing. It was making people tear at the eyes.
Right. They now, by the way, Aurora Police have now confirmed that was tear gas that he threw into the audience. So he throws a canister of tear gas. You hear that thing pop, as those things will do, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then when did the shooting start?
I want to say 2 seconds after the canister popped.
And then, Corbin, you hit the ground, and the gunman never said a word to the audience, right? I mean, when people, obviously, he started shooting, people realized this was not a stunt. This was a real situation. People were really getting hurt. You're on the ground. He's moving through the crowd. And the movie's still playing at this point, right? Because nobody up in the projection booth knew what was going on. So now you've got this surreal scene. The movie's playing loudly. It's a big, intense action movie. People are hitting the floor and trying to figure out which way this gunman's going, because was there a moment where he was trying to get people and shoot people who were trying to leave the theater?
I immediately went to the floor, and along with my friend who went to the floor, fell right on me. Mm-hmm. And we were there for 10 seconds hearing this gunfire going off, hearing people screaming. I'd never heard anybody scream like that in my life. And after the 10 seconds, I realized we need to stay calm and that we need to crawl our way towards the other side of the auditorium. And as we were crawling, we could hear the shells from the bullets just hitting the ground. Some of them rolled up under the first row it burned me in the leg. I still have the burn scar.
Yeah, right. That's what they would be incredibly hot. And at that point, had he moved past you? Were you aware of where he was?
I was not even. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was not looking at that direction at all. I kept thinking of what was ahead of me and making sure kept looking back to make sure that my friend was still with me as we were crawling.
Wow.
But I was not gonna get up to look to see where the killer was.
And how did you eventually get out of the theater?
By still bear crawling. Once I got to the other side of the auditorium where the other aisle was, we were crawling up, and there was a moment where it was silent. I wasn't sure if the gunman was still in the auditorium or if he was at the higher rows waiting to see if somebody was going to move so he can pick them off as well. But I looked up,
could you still hear? I'm sorry. Let me just stop you on that point, though. Could you still hear people screaming, and you could hear people in the theater, though, right?
At this point, there was nobody screaming. It was just quiet, and there was tear gas. I looked around, and I saw bodies in the upper part of the auditorium laying over the chairs, and there were people laying on the stairs and on the floor in front of us. And once I realized it was clear, I looked at my friend, and she was struggling to breathe because she has asthma, and I grabbed her, and I said, we have to run out, and we ran out.
You ran through one of those exits, one of those emergency exits?
No. There was only one emergency exit to the far right of the theater.
Got it. So you went back up through the lobby. You went back up through the lobby at that point. And then once you got out in the lobby, the gunman was gone, right? Who was out there?
Yes.
What did you see when you got out in the lobby?
When I got to the lobby, there were people trying to rush out the doors. There were some people who were by the ticket booths, and they had a confusion look on their face. And as I was coming out, a few police officers were coming in with their rifles.
How long of a period of time do you think this was, from the time that he released that first canister to when you got out of the theater?
Honestly, once it all took place, you don't think about the time frame of how long it took.
Yeah.
It's not something that's not a top priority on your mind.
Yeah, but can you guess? Was it 5 minutes? Was it 2 minutes? Was it 20 minutes?
I want to say maybe about 15, 20 minutes. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. It's about, and when you talk to witnesses who've gone through things like this, it's an almost impossible thing because time gets compressed. All you're thinking about is, how are you going to survive this? How are you going to avoid getting hit in a situation like this? All right, so you got out, and then once you were out of the theater, did law enforcement then just corral everybody because they wanted to talk to everyone? What happened then?
Once I got out of the theater, my friend was with me. We rushed back to my car, and I dropped her off at her car so that she can get out. The parking lot was filled, and obviously the line wasn't going anywhere, so I wasn't going to stay there. So I climbed a hill and got out of the parking lot, and I drove as far away as I could.
Yeah, and then you eventually did talk to the Aurora police. All right, Corbin, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Corbin.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Corbin Dates, who was in the second row, Theater 9, in the Century 16 Theater in Aurora, Colorado on Friday night. Friday morning, I should say. Thursday night and Friday morning. All right, compelling stuff. Stay right here. Coming up on the program, we've got some other things we're going to talk to you about today. Obviously, the beginning of the Drew Peterson trial has started in Joliet. We'll take you there. Ron Majors will join us. And also, Lester Munson will weigh in on the Penn State sanctions. Penn State football basically dealt a death penalty that is beyond anything any college football team has ever seen. Stay right here.